This video is the second part of two parts video on the United States of America, and I wanted to develop 14 points about America, and I will list the 14 points. The 7 first points have been developed broadly in the first video. I will put the link to the first video, and I recommend that you should watch the first video if you want to understand this video, because yeah. So the first point was to present my identity, what I am or who I am. The second point was that the idea that America might possibly be the most Hegelian nation on earth. The third point was that whites control America, for better and for worse. The fourth point is that America has been the world prominent historical agent for more than a century now. In the fifth point, I talked about ethnicity in today's America. In the sixth point, I talk about whites and the figures of white consciousness in today's America. And in the seventh point, I talked about American politics and geopolitics. And the eighth point that I will start developing once I have presented the broad structure is talking about American culture and cultural Hegelianism as a ideology, I guess. And I will talk about Eminem and Lady Gaga. In the ninth point, I will talk about blacks in America. In the 10th point, I will talk about the relationship of whites and South America. In the 11th point, I will talk about white American movie directors, white American historical figures, white American writers, and the Irish whites, the Italian whites, and the Eastern whites in America. In the 12th point, I will talk about the idea that white Americans have no culture. In the 13th point, I will talk about American philosophy. And in the 14th point, I will talk about historical figures of consciousness coming from America in the modern age, like Obama, Trump, Clinton, Bush, Biden, and yeah. So, point number 8. Cultural Hegelianism is a philosophy of life, I guess, whose purpose, one of the purpose of cultural Hegelianism, is to hijack modern pop culture, which is mostly American pop culture, to help spread traditionalist ideas and Hegelian ideas, which are Germanic ideas. And Hollywood movies and modern pop culture, which are predominantly, all Hollywood movies are Americans, but modern pop music is predominantly American and has a worldwide influence. And there are two artists that I would like to talk about, which may be the most Hegelian artists living today. And these are Eminem and Lady Gaga. And if I were honest, I would say that Eminem is the embodiment of God on earth, in the sphere of modern pop music. And Lady Gaga is the female counterpart of God in the modern pop music industry, because these two artists, what they have in common is that they are conflicted individuals with many aspects of their psychology, which is reflected in their music. And they are absolute geniuses. And what they have in common is that they succeed in transcending a negative part that they have in themselves, which cause them to suffer. They transcend their inner negativity, which all humans have, because all humans are made in the image of God, and God has negativity within himself. And they use this negative part of themselves to transcend themselves in an artistic expression. And the result is a mixture of conflict and a depth of insights and a creative genius and aspects of torment and love and comedy and suffering and brilliance. And Eminem and Lady Gaga, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that they are the male voice of God on earth in modern pop culture, and the female voice of God on earth in modern pop culture. I'm not saying, because strictly speaking, all artists are inspired by Spirit himself, but these two figures, they are the most complete, the most total, the most Hegelian, because they have all aspects within themselves. And if I had to express my personal thoughts, I would say that they are pure geniuses. Eminem is a pure genius, and Lady Gaga is a pure genius. And yeah. Then I will talk about blacks in America. Hegel, the historical Hegel, was prejudiced against Africans. He was a very Eurocentric thinker, and he wrote and said many unpleasant things about black Africans. But my view consists in envisioning the possibility that Hegel needs to be actualized, and that there are things that he forgot to say, and that Hegel is not completely dead, in the sense that his thought is still living and needs to self-actualize. And this process of self-actualization of oneself is the philosophy of Hegel. So the philosophy of Hegel includes within itself the need to negate itself. And this is cultural Hegelianism, I guess. So if I had to talk about Afro-Americans, I would say that Afro-American music for the past century has expressed an aspect of the African and Afro-American genius. And today, through the mediation of modern, mostly American pop cultures, there are Afro-American artists who are known and celebrated and loved and admired throughout the world. And a lot of black historical figures have become known through the mediation of America, whether the United States of America or America as a continent. And in the time of Hegel, no one could name any black figures of consciousness. And since the days of Hegel, we've had Toussaint Louverture, who was not an Afro-American, but he was a black in the continent of America, who Zizek often talks about him. He tried to transcend the ideas of the French Revolution and to make the ideas of the French Revolution, who were universal, to adopt them. So that was a very Hegelian thing to do. And in the context of the United States of America, there has been W.E.B. Du Bois, who has had an influence upon black thinking, and there's been Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and of course Obama. And these black figures of consciousness are worldly known, and Martin Luther King and Obama are two of the most well-known and most celebrated and most loved persons in the Western world and in the world at large. And as of now, they may be the most famous blacks ever. And they are American blacks. And there's also LeBron James and Michael Jordan and the great basketball players. And they are loved and admired for their talent and their genius throughout the world. So in the days of Hegel, there was not a single black and not even Afro-American or black figures known, or very few. And in today's world, 2 centuries later, blacks have become famous and admired and loved throughout the world, mostly through the mediation of the United States of America. The election of Barack Obama was a worldwide phenomenon, and it was made possible because, or in spite of, depending on how what perspective you adopt, because of or in spite of the United States of America and its history. So, yeah. Now, I will talk about South America. The most famous Argentinians are probably Diego Maradona, who was supposedly the God-made football player, Lionel Messi, and Ernesto Guevara. Messi is white, Maradona was a mixed-raced individual, and Ernesto Guevara was a white. So then again, we find this idea that he was a white European born Argentinian revolting against the United States, who were then controlled by whites. So wherever we go, we find conflicts within the white race. And he is the embodiment of a revolutionary idealism. And there are people of all colors throughout the world who worship, often teenagers and young people who worship Ernesto Guevara, who was a white European. And then in South America, of course, there are the natives and the blacks and the Asians and the mixed-race people, but many figures of consciousness in Central and in Central and South America are white. Fidel Castro was partly European. Shakira, she's Colombian, but she's a European. Pinochet, he was partly European. That's not the greatest white figures of consciousness one can think of, but he's part of world history, I guess. In Brazil, Lula, Bolsonaro, the people who discovered, that's a very Eurocentric perspective, because to say that America was discovered, because does it mean that those who were there before had not discovered their own continent? I don't know, but what we call the discovery of America was a process and a product of white endeavor. Columbus was white, Cortes and Pizarro were white, and Simon Bolivar, who rebelled against the colonists, was a white European, and he's considered to be a hero in South America. So the history of South America has been shaped, for better and for worse, by white Europeans. Then, point 11. I will talk about white American movie directors, and here I go back to the United States. Someone like Quentin Tarantino, he's a white American, and he produces very anti-white movies. In most of his movies, the bad guy is white. And Michael Moore, he's a white, and his movies or political activism is directed against whites. So Tarantino and Michael Moore, who are considered pop culture heroes for many leftists, white or non-white, they are self-hating whites. Then we have people like Coppola and Martin Scorsese. These are Italian Americans. They are whites. And the white Italian identity is part of the history of America. And De Niro and Al Pacino, they are whites, and they are considered to be some of the greatest movie actors ever. Someone like David Lynch, his movies are so strange and fascinating and weird. Christopher Nolan, he's a genius of a movie director, and in most of the greatest Hollywood movies, the bad guy is always a white person, mostly white Nordic European, and the good guy is not always white, but most of the time the good guy is white also, and his mission consists in saving the non-whites from the negative influence of his white counterpart. You find this in Batman, in Django Unchained. It's the white guy who helps the black man confront the white negativity. So the white race is a conflicted race. Then I will talk about the figures of consciousness, the historical characters of white America, as listed by Michael Hart, who is a Jewish author, in his book, The 100 Most Influential Historical Figures. And he lists at least 7 or 8 white American historically influential figures. There's George Washington, of course, the Wright brothers, who apparently invented the airplanes, Thomas Edison, William Morton, Thomas Jefferson, Kennedy, Henry Ford, Benjamin Franklin, and Abraham Lincoln. And history is not over yet, so there might be other white Americans who will become very influential, we shall know. And it gives me the opportunity to talk about the relationship between Irish white Americans and Italian white Americans, because I know broadly enough about America to know that in the 19th century, the Irish and the Poles, or the Russians, the white Russians and the white Poles, and the Italians were kind of in a conflictual relationship with the white Anglo-Saxons. They were rejected and considered to be inferior or not worthy of entering American soil, who was thought to be the possession of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And the great Hegelian irony is that a century later, in the white nationalist movements rising in America, today's white nationalists, they try to incorporate the consciousness of the Irish, the Poles, and the Italians within the white movement. So those who had been rejected by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants are now being included. And that's a Hegelian process. And the Irish and the Italians are maybe the two brands of white ethnic groups in the US who are kind of allowed by the left, which is the morally dominant force in America, to defend their identity because they have historically been oppressed by the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority. So you are allowed to be white and to defend your identity if and only if you have been historically oppressed by whites. So that's complicated. Then I will talk about the white American writers that I know about. There's Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Steinbeck and Hemingway, Jack London, Melville, and all these great white American writers. They all share in their writings a view of the intensity of life, of the process of living, and the powers of nature, and the sublime aspect of nature, the transcendence immanent in the experience of life and of nature. And they are all Nietzschean writers. They have all a Nietzschean perspective on life. And America has produced tremendously gifted white writers. And now the question of American philosophy. America is a very creative country, but in the field of philosophy, they are like the English in a sense that there hasn't been any great American philosopher. Great in the Greek or German sense of the word, in the sense that Heidegger said that philosophy only spoke Greek and German, which is kind of a... It's not completely true, but it's not completely false either. But there may be a deep truth in this perspective. But America lacks a speculative philosophy, and maybe it is the historical role of Germany to provide America with its own brand of speculative philosophy. And I don't know if this idea is true, maybe it is, but the idea that a German thinker might conquer America in thought, and that Germany might conquer America in thought and spirit, is an idea which seems unintelligible to Americans. Because for them, the idea of a conquest implies economic conquest, military conquest. We have to produce missiles and guns and supplies, and we have to fight. That's the American way of envisioning conquest. The Germanic way is also militaristic, but on a deeper level, it's a conceptual process. And this idea that one can conquer an entire country just by thinking about the country is an idea which the Americans do not yet understand, and hopefully someday they will understand. I don't know. But in the realm of philosophy, the Americans and the Anglo-Saxon world at large, but mostly American, are responsible, for better and for worse, of the sustaining and the promotion of sociobiology. Sociobiological thought is alive and being developed mostly in the Anglo-Saxon world and mostly in America. And America is the land of free speech and the internet. The world can enjoy the benefits of the internet because of the creative minds of white Americans. It's the internet is a product of military development, but it's also a product of white minds. So the world owes a lot to America. And now I inverted the points, but I guess it's part of the process. With all that I've just said, the idea, which is, as of now, it's widespread in leftist and even right-wing circles in America, the idea that white Americans have no culture. When you think about this idea, it might be the most ludicrous, one of the most ludicrous ideas ever invented, and the one who was responsible for making white Americans believe that they have no culture might be the greatest deceiver and the greatest magician ever. Because for a white American, with all that I've just said in very broad outline in the past 2 videos, the idea that white Americans have no culture, it's a very profound joke to make a white American believe that he has no culture. in the most speculative depth of God's mind, probably it's one of the most comical jokes ever. And maybe one day white Americans will laugh at God for having made them believe that they had no culture. I don't know. Hopefully we see. I don't know. And also about white American culture. It's real culture, and real in the language of Hegel is that which includes negation within itself, because American culture, which is not white culture, but which is predominantly white culture in the movie industry, the music industry, and so on and so forth, is real culture because it belongs to all the people. It's a worldwide culture. It's a popular culture. And the difference between aristocratic culture and real culture is the sense that aristocratic culture only belongs to the aristocrats. And in this sense, European culture is an aristocratic culture in the sense that the highest peak of culture is Beethoven, Richard Wagner, Shakespeare, Plato, maybe Hegel. So the most elevated forms of culture is and remains European. But American culture, which is partly white, mostly white, but not only, like I've said, there are Afro-American influences, Jewish influences, and so on and so forth, but it is real culture in the sense that it is a culture which can speak and evoke expressions of the human mind or the divine mind to people of all cultures and all colors and all origins and all backgrounds. And the American artists that I've mentioned, black or white, but who are typically American, they are influential throughout the whole world. So that's something to consider. And now I will talk about the really existing historical figures of white American consciousness, or American consciousness, white or non-white. If I have the possibility, I will make a more detailed video about Barack Obama and about Trump. I don't know, but what I can broadly say in broad outline about Trump is that his motto, "Make America Great Again," has had a tremendously influential and powerful impact upon the whole world. Because I believe that the truth of this formal motto is, the way I envision things, I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, God will correct me. The truth of Make America Great Again is make Hegel great again. And the real truth is make God great again. And maybe someday God will say, I have to make myself great again. Maybe we will live to see the day where God will speak directly to mankind and say, I have to make myself great again because I have lost my greatness and I need to restore my greatness. I don't know. And if I wanted to make a Hegelian joke, I would say that Donald Trump is world spirit wearing orange makeup. The manifestation of world spirit. From the perspective of white America, Bill Clinton might be the worst president for white America. But because he's the worst, he has inspired white America into saving itself. So he may not be that bad after all. We shall know. I wonder, will Barack Obama and George Bush and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, will these figures of world consciousness, will they one day realize and wonder, had I been inspired by world spirit? I don't know. At this moment in time, I have no idea of what will happen. I don't know if the historical figures of consciousness that I have listed will recognize themselves as being embodiment of world spirit in a Hegelian sense. I don't know. And I will conclude that by saying that this Hegelian process is very strange, and that maybe only an American can understand America, whether he's white American, Hispanic American, black American, Native American, whatever. Only an American can understand America. And in this sense, I am not an American. From an empirical standpoint, I'm not an American, so I cannot fully understand America. But there's the possibility that a German mind might help the Americans understand themselves. And we might live to see the day where God will say that for better and for worse, America was made in the image of God, and maybe one day God will say that he loves America for the liberty that it has offered him. And life is difficult, but you got to deal with it, and that's an American motto. And maybe God has a lot to learn about the strength of the American people, which has always remained strong in hardship, and that's what being an American is, whether you're black or white or Jew or whatever, to find the strength to endure the hardships of existence, and to find God, and to love God in spite of all the difficulties of existence. That may be the lesson that America can teach God, and that God can teach to America. We shall see. So